All right, what up, folks? Shadow Gauge here. Today I'm going to be going over something that it kind of really escaped me for a long time. What a lot of the functions with Reverb were, and just what they meant, what they did, and what they could be used for. And I did get have to go pretty high into the um, engineering courses to get this information, mind you. But I will be working with in the familiar with the three space mix theory. I'm sure it's very popular book and whatever. If you've seen the box with the colored shapes and placement, that's basically the three space mix theory, or the just basically the whole idea is creating a 3D environment for your sound. Now I went through and I've done this. I basically uh, made my own instrument racks on all of these, so that I could dial them in a lot easier. Um, if you pull it up, you'll see that everything's nice and you know, concise, so it stays within a limit. But I'll basically be going over my thought process on this, sharing some of my information. Um, so first thing I want to pull up is this here is screens. Yeah, this is a failure on my part. So I figure I'll pull this up while I do this and kind of explain a few things here. So essentially, um, I can't even see it. Ha ha ha! This is a bad idea. Um, so yeah, things to remember. So by default, the reverb will blend together and create and so essentially, so what that means is if if you're obviously probably writing in a homophonic manner, if you even know what that means. um, but essentially, you have an accompaniment and then an actual like face to your music. Um, and in that case, you want your face to actually not blend. So, but you want everything else to blend because you don't want it to, you know, outstage your main idea. So that's where putting those in the same reverb channel, you can kind of start blending instruments together by the same context to create more contrast. You could basically just twiddle the knobs a little bit, change some of the numbers around, and you're good to go. The most important parameters in any reverb are pre-delay, decay, and high cut. Okay. Now I'll just kind of go over the I'll leave this up for a brief second. Let y'all get an idea. Those are some of my notes from class. Um, first thing I'm going to be getting into, of course, we're going to discuss the front space. Now, with the front space, um, you basically have it's where your drums are going to sit. Now, I have my drums and my front space separate. Okay, so in general, your delay time is going to be, your decay is going to be between 200 milliseconds and 1 second. Um, Essentially the DH shape. So what that is that's basically your diffusion. It's a little fancier diffusion. And then of course you have the low frequency modulation, which is going to be between 5% and 30% on your front and on your drum. I usually keep it lower on the drum than on the front. Um, and then yeah, I think that about covers it. Your pre-delay time, that's going to be very short. So because essentially it's the time it takes to get to you. Now, one thing to keep in mind is this is also so when you're making this environment, you've got to keep in mind. So there's like you're pretending like there's a back wall. Okay, the reality matter is that pre-delay time is what sets it apart from the back wall. Now, when because it's such a short time, such a short decay for the actual front, you don't really have to worry that much about too much shaping. Um, but one of the things that I do differently on my drums than my basic is, I have this very aggressive cut around the 500 hertz range, and that's just because it's you have a tendency to really get muddy in that area. And then if we go in here and we look at, turn that off. Go in here and I look at my front. If I go into the EQ here, make sure I'm not covering my shit up. I totally am covering my shit up, aren't I? Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of that real quick. Do-do-do. Oh, come on. Yeah, I hate this. Need two monitors here. Okay, so chill that for a sec. Okay, so now if I'm going into my thing here, so you've noticed with the drums, I don't have them high cut. Okay, and with the front, I do have a high cut. We're usually around 16K. Let's see where am I sitting at here, 12K. Yeah, somewhere between 12 and 16K. And then of course I have the low end cut a little bit higher. Um, and I have the mids. Like these don't really have the mids cut out. Like I'm very vigorously doing it on the drums just because I want the drums to stick out. You know. Um, so another couple things that I changed here. With the drums, I like using the uh, the hybrid reverb in Ableton. I've went through a lot of reverbs at this point, and while I have ones that sound better, the thing is sometimes the controls are not very intuitive, and there's a certain set of basically standardized controls that I found don't seem to exist anywhere. But it's what they teach you in college, so kind of that shit's I guess fairly useless when it comes down to it. But I figured out what a few things like I figured out that shape is basically my diffusion. Um, Another thing I want to talk about is size here. I don't really fuck around with size much because I'm basically I'm dealing with the decay and I'm dealing with the pre-delay. So that's kind of going to overwrite size. So it's a lot more accurate. So if I change size, I'm like trying to dial it in. I don't need to dial it in if I have pre-delay and the decay. Like it's a very clear, set of numbers. So, anyways, on my front, my decay is set at 200 milliseconds as low, or on my drums, the decay is set at 200 milliseconds, which is as low as it gets. I have my bass multiplier turned down because I want it to like shine, I want it to ring. My bass multiplier is, of course, my crossover is set at 1K. Um, and yeah, I have this on made for drums and doing the digital plate is now. I mean, this you can really go for any of the ones here. A live studio drum room is actually really good too. But digital plates have a tendency. The plates in general have a tendency to kind of have this nice, I don't know, this uh, vibrance to them. So I like using the plates. So anyway, I'll use that for the drums. And then if you go into the front here, I'm just basically, again, I'm using plates, dark plate because I don't want it to stick out as much as the drums. I have the shape turned up so that there's a higher diffusion than I'm using on the drums. So the drum's going to be much crispier, and then everything else in front is going to be a little less crispy. You know, um, and then basically again here, it's yeah, the EQ is just very much a lot of times too I'll end up actually cutting this up to 500 um just to kind of get it out of the way. With the drums I don't necessarily do that, but as you notice I have like 500 cut out hard. So again 200, and then on the front I have it set to 320 with 5 pre-delay. The drums have a little bit more of a pre-delay because um, I want it to sound like they're, I don't know. It's a trick of the year here, but I want the drums to sound like they're more um, centered, which is why I do that. So they're still up front, but they're like It's like I don't know. If you can imagine, there's people standing on stage, like the drum kits, like right in front, right in the middle, and then you have like the violinist sitting in back, the bass players sitting up there in front, and cars sitting up there a little closer to the bass player. So that's essentially how it's how it works out in my mind. Um, Anyway, moving on. So then if we look at the mid setting, now the mid here, I've actually switched the algorithm to quartz. Oh yeah, I also wanted to talk about the modulation. Okay, so the mod here is at 12%, and the highest I want to go with the mod, what do I have it set at, 15, 30%? So 5 to 30%, okay? Now since this is going to have some tones in it, some modulation isn't bad. On my drums, I really don't have any modulation. It's set at 7. Like I don't want there's not going to be a lot of tones to be modulating, so I don't want to modulate it. So yeah, and then it said yeah, that's 12. Everything's crossover is about 1K. So if I come in here now, this gives me the option of distance. Okay, now that is essentially, I mean, that's what the pre-delay is. It's probably not really the best use, but it works good for the mid. So like, I've played around with a lot of the presets, and it just, I don't know. I guess it sounds better than using the bass multiplier, but it pretty much seems to have the same effect. So just slightly different. So, I'm kind of dampening the lows here. I want those lows to dissipate in the mid because, that's where my bass is going to be sitting. That's where a lot of the heavier, most of your instruments are going to be in this area, you know, most of your sound. So, it's best to cut out those lows because those lows tend to muddy up things a bit. If I go into my EQ, again, I'm cutting it about 12K. I'd probably actually cut this, probably cut this at 10K is probably a better idea, to be honest with you. But and then low frequency 230. I probably cut this up to 450. Honestly, um, that's just good practices. Distances for away decay about, the decay here I think is set between 1 and 2 seconds. Yeah, between 1 and 2 seconds. So, about a 14 millisecond delay. So that's, sounds like it's fairly decent away from the wall, and you know, that's the whole idea there. And then the back section, I have a fairly high modulation, around 35%. Bass multiplier. Now, bass multiplier on this, it basically, depending, if you go any higher than 3 seconds, you're probably going to want to increase the bass multiplier. Um, but that's going to give it a lot of more of a darker feel, like a cathedral kind of. I don't know. But it's like I said, it's really whatever you prefer. Um, on this, you're always going to want your diffusion at max. Okay, all the way up. Said pre-delay. Pre-delay is really short. So whatever is in back should be the shortest pre-delay. Now I know that it kind of seems weird because you got, okay, what's in front is at 7, your drums are 7, your front mix is at 5, and then your back mix is at 14, or your mid mix is at 14, and your back mix is at 3. Um, so why is the mid mix in the middle? Good question. If anybody can answer that, please do. That's just how I was taught to do it. And I mean, I'm sure it makes sense somewhere, but who knows? Who knows? They're saying, just do it this way. This is just how you do it. Like, I understand a lot of it to a certain extent, but I understand the reason for the base multiplier. I understand the reason why having it at 1K would be very, very useful. And I do understand the pre-delay, but I'm not exactly sure why. you know, in the back of my mind, I'm like thinking that the front mix and the drum mix should have a much higher pre-delay. But I guess because of the short decay, maybe not. Maybe there's a relation between the decay and the pre-delay. That would actually make sense. Um, anyway, so another thing that I do here, I'll pull up these real quick. So while I'm going over this, so you can go ahead and see my mid settings. Da, 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 da. There we go. There's a middle space, and then that should be able to allow me to talk about my setup here. Okay, so if I pull these up, all of these are being sent to the same channel. Okay, so and it's set to sends only. And anytime now, normally, I don't actually. A lot of times, I don't actually. These are my bus channels, which have whatever. I'll go over my busing here soon. My bus compression, but a lot of times I'm not sending my bus channels to the actual reverb. I'm sending the instruments themselves to the reverb because there's times where I'll want things in the front to blend, but I want them to blend like within the mid range. I don't want them to blend up front. And there's times so and same with the bass. Like with the bass, I kind of want the bass to be, on my mix. I want it to be sitting here in mid, but I want it to be up front when it's in the actual, like, in the zone that it's sitting in. Like, I want it to seem like it's up front. But, it's when I start to get into the busing, I'll explain why that is. Um, But anyway, so in order to do this, you can basically right click on any of these and go to enable send. So I basically just have all enabled, sending it at 18 decibels, negative 18 decibels, which is actually 0 decibels, because that's where everything works best at. And those are being sent into a reverb. Now, or into my, I have a multi-band reverb thing. Now, let me go ahead and pull up my last little sheet here so you can see the final cheat sheet on your lows. So that's your low settings. Um, but anyway, let's see. Yeah, so base I have all these set at negative 18 going into this one. They're all set as synths only. This one's going to master, and yeah, yeah. So I think that probably enough time up on there. Let's go ahead, bring this down, and I will finish out this tutorial and explain what the heck is going on this. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So essentially, what I've first done here is I have my lows separated at 200 hertz and my highs separated at 5K. My lows, if you notice, I kind of have a little bit of compression here, so that basically the lows drop out quicker. I'm taking the lows way quicker. Um, and that's this is one of the main uh, one of the best practices and one of the best ways to get your everything to sound good is I'm basically shaping the all of the reverbs at this point. Okay, so that way the ones in the mid section, in the mid frequency section, which are all set, you know what I'm saying? When I went in here and set all these, like all the frequencies are very specific. If I go down the line, you can kind of see the idea here. So it's like there's the drums, there's the front, there's the mid, there's the back. You know, and it's probably actually not cut this mid so harsh. See what I set that at 500, 450. Bring it down. Bring it down to 380, maybe even go to 12 there. Yeah, probably. Even on this one, maybe. Oh, that's 36. Yeah, I don't want 36. There we go. That looks a little better. Oh yeah, yeah, perfect. So that looks good on the EQs. So essentially, you know, if you can tell, the lows are basically anytime the lows like this will get the lows. So it's basically pushing the reverb from the drums out. It's going to be pushing the reverb from the midsection out. A little bit from the front, not so much, uh, just because it's that higher thing. And then of course from the back. So, but the back's also going to have the highest aggressively cut high section as well. Um, so So yeah, essentially that's that. And then if you go in here and if I go into these, you'll notice that my midsection is actually being pulled up a little bit while the highs are being pushed down. So and that's that's essentially, you know, may not be the best of ideas. I may go through and fix that. I do have my time turned up so that things happen hopefully a little quicker than they would. But yeah, so anyways, that's the whole idea behind creating a mix space, um, an environment for basically for your instruments to sit in. Um, I was kind of sad about it because at the point I learned this, it was like I just done an entire album and I don't know. I wanted to go through and fix all the songs because it just, one of the things that this does is it'll help your drums stand out. And that's one of the things I was having a constant difficulty. Anyway, so hopefully that's quick and to the point. Hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.